Hey everyone, I'm Dave G, and this is a podcast that I've been wanting to make for a long time. Of course, those that have followed my career will know that I've been film reviewing now and doing interviews with actors, actresses, and directors for 26 years. I started out when I was 15 at a little country newspaper, and now I'm 41, and of course I do radio, I do written work here in Australia, in Thailand as well, where I work for the Phuket News, and also just recently in Canada, and of course the United Kingdom with the book, the film, the T-shirt. I've been wanting to do a kind of personal podcast for a while. All the podcasts I do with other people. I do a podcast with my best mate, who is another film critic, called The Popcorn Conspiracy. I do a pop culture podcast with another friend and colleague, just called Subculture, and I also do one with my wife as well called He Says, She Says. And of course with radio, I'm always on with other film critics. I kind of wanted to do a really personal podcast. So I'm doing this one, which is called A Critic's Journey. And what I'm going to do on this podcast is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to look at new films. I might look at films that are getting re-released occasionally, but the main aim for this podcast is going to be looking at films that, for some reason, at that time I've decided to either go back and watch, or an old film that I've decided to watch for the first time. There's just some nights where I'm sitting down and I just look at the shelf and go, I really want to watch that film, or I've been meaning to watch that film. The other thing I want to do too is sometimes go back and watch films that I have reviewed over the years and see if I still feel the same way about the film, because there's been times where I've actually reviewed a film years and years ago and then watched it later on and my opinion of the film has changed. So I thought I would do that. Now, why do I watch films? Now, I watch films for a number of reasons. I love cinema, of course. That's a given. But sometimes I kind of like fall down these rabbit holes where, like, just recently on Netflix, I went back and watched Dawson's Creek, the TV series, and then I kind of fell into a little bit of a rabbit hole where I started to go and watch the films that the different actors from Dawson's Creek had made since they finished the show, and in Joshua Jackson's case, before he was on the show. And I guess the film I'm looking at today kind of falls into that rabbit hole section, because last week I interviewed Bill Lineback, the director of a documentary that's just been re-released called Walkabout to Hollywood, which looks at Australian actor David Griffiths, who a fantastic Indigenous actor. If you haven't seen his work, go and hunt down some of his films. And after I watched the documentary and remembered how much I loved watching this guy's work, I decided to go back and go through my own collection and watch some of his films. So the first film I'm actually going to be looking at on A Critic's Journey is Mad Dog Morgan, a movie that came out way back in 1976. Now, I don't think I'd watched this film before. I've owned it for ages, but I don't think I'd watched it. And I remember the reason I bought it was because when I was very, very young, I was obsessed by Ned Kelly. And my dad took me up into Kelly country and then said, I've got to take you to some other places that are kind of up on the New South Wales Victorian border. And he started to teach me all about this other bushranger called Mad Dog Morgan. And I remember we actually went to this place, and my dad said up there is where Morgan used to camp, so he could see if the troopers were coming. And I kind of got a little bit obsessed by this bushranger, Mad Dog Morgan, and I was kind of horrified to find that there wasn't much about him. Like, he was as notorious as Ned Kelly, but Ned Kelly has had so many books and so many films made about him over the years, but Mad Dog Morgan, there wasn't a lot. There certainly wasn't a colouring book like there was of Ned Kelly. And I remember hearing about this movie, but of course at the time I was too young to watch it. And then as the years went on, and I got involved with things like AFI and ACTA, I was at I think it was a conference, or it might have been a convention at one point, and people were talking about this marvelous performance by Dennis Hopper in Mad Dog Morgan. And one of the reasons they were saying it was so fantastic was because apparently when Dennis Hopper came out to make this movie, it was at this kind of wild stage of his career, and mainstream Hollywood was kind of too frightened to hire him. So they brought him out here to make this Ozploitation movie called Mad Dog Morgan. And the interesting part was that, and I'm not saying anything here that I'm hoping I can get sued for, but apparently he drank a lot while he was here making the movie, and kind of said that he was doing it to get into character. But I remember someone who worked on the film talking at one of these conferences, and they said there was one day where Hopper was so drunk that they actually had to prop him up against a tree for him to deliver his lines, because there was no way that he could stand on his own. And I should point out, that's something I'm going to do on this podcast. I'll go back and talk about the history of the film as well. I won't just review the film. So anyway, I've had this movie, Mad Dog Morgan, on my shelf for ages, and have been meaning to watch it because of my fascination with Morgan himself. And then last night just seemed the right time, considering I'd just done all this work for an interview about Walkabout to Hollywood. Of course, David Gopperville is in Mad Dog Morgan, the film. Not that if you own the copy of the DVD that I owned, you would kind of know that, because he's hidden away in the cast at the back and not on the front cover at all. Now, aside from Dennis Hopper, another reason why I wanted to watch this movie was Jack Thompson. Jack Thompson is, for me, the actor's actor. I have loved Jack Thompson ever since I was a kid. He's in some of my favourite movies of all time. And then when we were doing our television show, Crosswide, several years ago, I actually had the pleasure of being able to interview Jack Thompson. At all places we were at was actually a protest rally, if I remember correctly, about the climate here in Australia. And Jack Thompson was there, and we ended up having the opportunity of being able to talk to him, which was absolutely fantastic. And the bit that I really regretted was we never actually had the chance to sit there and talk about his films, which I would have loved to have done. We talked more about why he was there at the protest, but I would have absolutely have loved to have been able to talk to him about his films as well. So, Mad Dog Morgan. What can I say about this as a film? It's an unusual film. I'll admit, I wasn't expecting it to be quite the way it was. Now, a few people had told me that the film slotted nicely into that Ozploitation style of film. That style of film that Quentin Tarantino fell in love with so much that it started him on his journey with filmmaking. I didn't expect for the film to be quite as alternative as it was, and interestingly enough, where this film fits in the sense of genre is really kind of unusual, because the film actually picked up awards when it came out as a Western. It won the Best Western at the Western Film Festival at the 76 Cannes Film Festival. And it does feel like a Western when you're watching it. There's a lot of horse riding. It's not the Australian outback. A lot of people say it's the Australian outback. It's not. It's the Victorian New South Wales border. And that's something that the director of the film, Philip Mora, did quite well. He actually went to some of the spots where Morgan was to film this. So you can't criticize the way the film looks. The film's chaotic. I'll say that. I said that the film was very different to what I expected, and it was. I didn't expect a commercial kind of film like the Ned Kelly film that we saw a few years ago. I think I was expecting a more placid history film. But this film is crazy. It's manic. There's times when like the camera is moving, when it's just a close up of an actor speaking. It's so ahead of its time. It's not funny. It doesn't feel like an Australian film when you're watching it. It is very ochre in the language that's used in the film, and of course definitely the cinematography. But aside from that, it feels more European. It almost feels experimental. I guess that's the only way I could describe this movie. Is it's very experimental. If you think of movies like Elephant from recent times, and if you think of films like that, then you're kind of getting what you're going to get with Mad Dog Morgan. It's a harsh film. Please don't sit down and watch this film with your kids, because it is a pretty harsh film. You witness a rape at one point in this film. You witness just how Morgan was brutalized and beaten, and how he ended up becoming the person that he became, the ruthless kind of bushranger. Performance-wise, I've got to say that's kind of what kept my interest with this film. It's a very difficult film to keep attention to all the time. There's over 100 speaking parts in this film, so keeping track of characters and things like that is quite difficult at times. One of the things I did enjoy about the movie is once David Gopperville's character comes into this, the soundtrack a lot of the time is Indigenous instruments like the didgeridoo, and I think that really, really worked so well with this film. Now, outside of that, the performances in this film are brilliant. Dennis Hopper is absolutely fantastic. Now, we talk about actors who deeply embed themselves into their parts. Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. Leonardo DiCaprio pretty much in anything he's done, to be honest. Dennis Hopper does that with this movie. He does it really, really well. I'm not going to speculate on whether or not his drinking was because he was trying to get into character. I do know that at the end of this movie, he kind of left Australia disgraced because the police caught him drunk at the actual gravesite of Mad Dog Morgan himself and pretty hastily bundled him onto a plane and sent him back to Hollywood. But look, if Hopper was as drunk on set as people have said at conferences and stuff over the years, then man, he knows how to perform when he's drunk, because he does a great performance in this film. It is kind of weird that these movies, whenever they do a movie about an Australian bushranger, they love to seem to bring people from overseas to play the part. Mick Jagger, of course, was in a version of Ned Kelly that was made in the 70s or the 80s. And we're going to check that one out at some stage too. I'm kind of falling into a little bit of a rabbit burrow here at the moment of bushranger movies, so we might check out the Mick Jagger Ned Kelly pretty soon. Jack Thompson, as usual, fantastic in this film. When I start to think about the movies that I love Jack Thompson in, I've realised that if Jack Thompson had lived in America, he would have been in westerns. We saw him in High Ground just recently. You go back and think of movies like Breaker Morant, and Breaker Morant's a war film, but it has the feeling of a western in it at times. And look, you just realise that Jack Thompson would have been an absolutely amazing western actor if he'd been in the United States. And David Gopperville, I think it's really, like I said before, you buy the DVD of Mad Dog Morgan, and Jack Thompson and Dennis Hopper are on the front cover. Their names are up there in lights. David Gopperville is fantastic in this film, playing Morgan's offsider. And this film is a lot like what David Gopperville's career was like. I didn't realize until I watched Walkabout to Hollywood that David Gopperville was famous in America. The documentary looks at that so well. Here in Australia, he's one of those actors where he gets talked about in polite film circles because of Walkabout, and for a majority of Australian cinema goers, they probably remember him from Storm Boy because that was the film they watched when they were a kid. But he is a brilliant character actor. He does an absolutely amazing job in Mad Dog Morgan. And he's so natural. Like in Mad Dog Morgan, he's on horseback for some of the film and just puts in an absolutely amazing performance. So I guess to sum up, Mad Dog Morgan, not quite the film that I expected it was going to be. But having said that, I kind of mean that in a good way. I did expect this to kind of be your placid history film where it just chronicled the life of Mad Dog Morgan. I certainly didn't expect an alternative kind of film in the style of Lars von Trier. And it has actually made me want to hunt down a few more of the films by Philippe Mora. I really only knew him for things like Howling 3. I kind of knew that he was a little bit of an alternative filmmaker, but I didn't think that would have been the case for Mad Dog Morgan. Looking down his list right now, I've got to try and hunt down Pterodactyl Woman from Beverly Hills, because that looks like that would be a fascinating film to try and watch as well. But I liked what he did with Mad Dog Morgan. I was kind of pleasantly surprised that it was so alternative. Having said that, though, I did lose my way sometimes in this film. I think having 100+ speaking parts just introduced way too many characters. This really should have been a film that was Dennis Hopper's Mad Dog Morgan versus the troopers at the time and versus the politicians that so wanted him hunted down. There's way too many characters in this film. So having said that, it's kind of a film that's kind of hard to recommend unless you kind of like alternative films or you like your 1970s, 1980s Ozploitation films. Then you're probably not going to enjoy this film. If you're someone that loves Marvel films or anything like that, I don't think this is going to be the film for you. But look, if you're an Australian cinema fan, then this film is a must-see. You've got to go and see it. It is just it's a masterpiece of Australian filmmaking. That's one way of putting it, I guess. But I can't really go much higher than a 3 out of 5 because I do think that the film does lack a little bit. And it's made on a really low budget, and you know me, I love low budget films, so I'm not putting it down for that at all. But I just think story-wise, less characters and focus on the main characters a little bit more. But that's it for the first episode of A Critic's Journey. Not 100% sure what I'll watch next, but because things happen. Like, I'm kind of sitting here at the moment thinking that I might like to watch a few Bushranger movies, but who knows, in a couple of hours' time I might sit down and end up watching something completely different just because of the mood that I'm in. So that's it for the first episode of A Critic's Journey. But whenever I watch an older film, I will jump on and do another podcast. Expect these to be pretty regular because, of course, I can do these a lot easier than I can the others, where I've kind of got to also try and match up a time when I can get together with a co-host. Don't have to do that with these ones. I can kind of do these as I wish. So that's it. Mad Dog Morgan, 3 out of 5. Go and check it out if you kind of like your Ozploitation films. But that's it for now, and I'll see you soon.